right, so my name is Michelle Oyen, and I am a reader in engineering, actually in bioengineering, at the Cambridge University Engineering Department. So I have had this interest in women in STEM for a really long time, but then after a couple of years of being here in the UK, which you can probably tell from my voice, I come from somewhere else that I don't admit that I come from at the moment. I started to notice that there was a real lack, especially in the UK, in people talking about women in engineering. So they were talking about women in science, and there were lots of women in STEM, but not so much women in engineering. And of course, the proportions of women in engineering in the UK are actually the worst in the West. So there's a real problem here. What is it? And in the theme of this event, how can we do something to try and solve it? Now, as has been mentioned already, there are no end to thought pieces being written about this problem. This particular one, written by the person who was my former head of department at Cambridge, Dame Professor Anne Dowling, now the president of the Royal Academy of Engineering, Why Engineering Should Be a Woman's Game. Now this is, again, one of the things that I noticed on crossing the pond, that articles like this tended to be illustrated by a very particular type of photograph. And that looks like this. So, if you are writing an article about the skills gap and the need for more engineers in the UK, you illustrate it with a photograph of a dude in a hard hat. But if you're writing about the need for more women in engineering, you illustrate it with a picture of a girl in a hard hat. Now, the thing I love the most about this particular example is the caption, "Media stereotypes." Yes, media stereotype. This is a problem. What message do you think that you're sending to the next generation of potential engineers that this is what engineering is? So I started paying attention to this and sort of with my crossing the pond back and forth kind of thing, and realized that actually if you do a Google image search on the word engineer, this is the result from the UK. So, apparently, to be an engineer in the UK, with one exception, you are a dude in a hard hat, the engineer. So, this is a problem. It's not quite this 100% if you do the same search on the US servers for Google, but it's pretty bad. So, engineering has an image problem. How are we going to get young people excited about engineering if they have no idea what it is, and if that concept of what it is being constantly reinforced? So, my hypothesis and my focus of my outreach for the last couple of years now is that we have to try and appeal to women as potential engineers, and I say potential because I think we need to be aiming quite young, and we have to do that with information. So I have 5 points that I'm going to give as my practical examples here of things that I think we need to do to try and attract girls into engineering by giving them more information. So, first thing we need to do is we need to tell them what the heck engineering actually is. Now, I've been doing a little side research on this. I have a friend who writes a very popular blog about differences between English in America and in the UK. And it turns out that the dictionary definition of engineer is different in America and here. And here, it tends to focus on the hard hat disciplines. So this is from the Cambridge Dictionary, so naming and shaming my own world. A person whose job is to design or build machines, engines, electrical equipment, things such as road, railways, bridges, using scientific principles. So my own shorthand for this is that engineering is basically the planes, trains, and automobiles kinds of disciplines, right? Okay, so that's a really terrible definition of engineering, especially for me. I'm a bioengineer. I work on medical problems. I study blood flow in the placenta during pregnancy. So this is not at all the type of engineering I do, and I've never worn a hard hat, not even once ever. So I found a better engineering definition online, and I think this is the key thing. So this is from a website, typesofengineeringdegrees.org, and the key phrase, engineers produce creative solutions to real-world problems. Now, if you go and pitch that as what engineering is, as opposed to person in hard hat on a construction site, don't you think that you could possibly get more people to be interested and excited about this topic? Well, this same website actually has another thing that I think is important, and it's my step 2, which is to talk about the breadth of engineering, which is quite huge. This particular website specifies 40 different types of engineering degrees. I'm not sure I could name 40 types of engineering, but there are quite a few. And in fact, the important thing about there being quite a few is that only in some of them is there a huge gender gap. Now, of course, I know this because in my field, in bioengineering, it's about 40% female. Material science and engineering, which is also part of my background, it's almost 50%. Other fields like environmental engineering, it's up in the high 30s. So it's not that there's no women in engineering, it's that they do seem to cluster into particular types of engineering, and again, that might be important in trying to get kids excited about this. So, the next thing that I want to do is to focus on generational change. This is a graph of total academic faculty, women versus men, from 1975 to 2005. So, this is consistent with the fact that in the 1990s, when I was at university, there weren't very many female faculty members. And in fact, if you looked at engineering, there were hardly any. And in fact, I never had a single engineering female professor, bachelor's, master's, Ph.D. That's changing. And it's changing, but it's really lagging what we would think of as the feminist movement. So if you're looking at this graph, you can see proportion of women faculty in engineering 20 years ago, 25 years ago, still a very minute portion, but a wedge that's growing. So there is potential here, and when you start talking about role models, it's really important that we still don't have nearly enough. So we do not have enough very senior women to serve as role models, and really we don't, it's the leaky pipeline problem everywhere in STEM, but in engineering it's been particularly bad. But we can do something about that and see how it's changing and see how to nurture that to change more for the future. So step 4, celebrate diverse role models. I love the example of how little girls only think that Marie Curie is the only scientist to exist. This is my absolutely favorite historical engineer, the first woman who was appointed to the United States National Academy of Engineering, but also quite famous for another reason. This is the matriarch from the Cheaper by the Dozen books. So her kids wrote stories about what it was like having these parents raising these 12 kids, but it just turned out that at the same time she was this completely pioneering woman, absolutely changed engineering for females, and did so at a time before it was even very common for women to be getting higher education. So she's one of my favorite role models personally, but actually, last couple of years, there's been a great bunch of things that have happened on the internet where good things come to happen. There was this campaign, I Look Like an Engineer, and it started because people were saying, oh, that young, attractive female person can't be an engineer, that's not what engineers look like. But fortunately, this is what engineers look like, and a lot of us posted photos online. You get this huge amount of diversity, males, females, people from all different backgrounds, all different races, all different ethnicities, and so anyone can look like an engineer. This is a poster. It's available for free. You can download it at high resolution. You can put it up in your labs. You can put it up in your offices, any place where young girls might find that they're looking at information about engineering. And they can see that actually they might look a lot like somebody who could be an engineer in not too much longer. So that's diverse role models. My last point, and what's really become to me my most important point, is that you really have to start young. If you're talking about girls that are 14, 16 years old, they've already made a lot of decisions about not liking science, not wanting to be an engineer, especially if they think that that means washing machine repair person. So what we have to do is to get out this word about what engineering is, the breadth, what the discipline actually is, and to do it with really young girls. And so one of the things that we've been doing in Cambridge is we set up a chapter of this organization that was started in Australia called RoboGals, where you go out into schools and you bring Lego robots and you have the kids play with the Lego robots, which is great engineering because they can build stuff and they can do a little computer programming. They can get set a reasonably compact task, accomplish something. They're so happy. And then we have the volunteers who do this, who go out into the schools, each give a little spiel for a couple of minutes about what type of engineer they are, what they're doing, what their project is, what their research is. So I talk about my bioengineering, give them some things to play with, try and get them to reprogram this idea. This website that I flashed up earlier is also very good, Engineer Girl. It is from the United States National Academy of Engineering, and that's got all sorts of resources on it. And so I think that's been my target now, is to really focus on young girls in the sort of 8 to 12 age group, even younger, you know, before they've cemented these ideas about what engineering is and what it means. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.